Yoshihiro Kimura is a developer that many gamers might not be familiar with, even if you've played a game or two from his eclectic career. He's carved out somewhat of a niche audience with a lineup of titles that were created to counter popular trends in gaming at the time. Although he never sticks to one particular genre and mostly avoids creating sequels, his games are easily recognized by a couple signature traits. You can recognize a Kimura game if the game exudes a certain weirdness about it, contains charming dialogue or well-developed characters, and acts as a bizarre parody of more recognizable mainstream games. Kimura's had a hand in a lot of games I love. He was the creator of the antithetical Animal Crossing about a little monkey man going around collecting kisses, Chulip. He wrote the story of Rule of Rose, which ended up becoming banned in several countries for some of the thematic content involving a cast of children antagonists placed in hyper-violent and implicitly sexual situations. And to tie him into my Grasshopper B-side series, he was the producer on No More Heroes. Fed up with the corporate suits pushing him around and telling him what to do, he took a brief sabbatical from the video games industry, traveling around the world and meeting with other developers. And he wasn't gone for long because he took notice of former developers breaking away from their corporate overlords and forming their own video game studios. One day during this sabbatical, Kimura went back into his apartment, downloaded the petite computer application for the 3DS, and almost never left his home as he was developing the prototype to Dandy Dungeon. Kimura fell back in love with creating video games, and he knew that in order to realize his dreams for Dandy Dungeon, that he would need a little bit more help. So he assembled what I like to refer to as the Weird Avengers, aka Onion Games. Onion Games is comprised of former members of Punchline, the developers of Chulip, and Grasshopper Manufacture, and you can trace both of these influences in their first developed title, Dandy Dungeon, Legend of Brave Yamada. All you need to know is it's the greatest thing ever, and I'm so excited to share it with you. The story begins with our protagonist, Yamada, who's a 36-year-old programmer for a big video game studio. Finding that the corporate grind is sucking at his soul, he decides to develop his own video game in his bedroom in his underwear. Yamada falls back in love with making video games, so much so that he forgets to go back to work, which prompts his ugly caricature-faced boss to show up at his apartment, cane fuck his mouth, and fire Yamada. This doesn't bother Yamada so much because he has a new goal in mind. He wants to develop his own video game to impress the new girl that moved in next door. And he can tell how close he is to winning her heart by an application on his phone. Don't ask me how it works, just roll with it. So there's two core aspects to the gameplay here. There's the real world where Yamada is programming his video game, and then there's the video game world that he's developing, which is a roguelike RPG, which contains all sorts of self-insert characters. And you guessed it, Yamada's the hero. The game progression in Dandy Dungeon is some of the most unique and entertaining I've seen in a mobile game. The further you get into the game, the more Yamada learns to program, and he implements new features in his game world. He'll start to learn how to program things like monsters and traps, boss fights, and randomly generated dungeons. The game world is a simple yet deep take on a dungeon-crawling roguelike RPG with an objective of moving Hero Yamada across all the tiles on the dungeon floor in one solid line to get to the goal. It's a roguelike meets a puzzle game, which makes perfect sense for the mobile platform. Now you're given an unlimited amount of time to work out your plan of attack to reach the goal before you send Yamada on his way. But the moment you touch the screen, the timer begins to tick down and you've got to draw your pathway to the goal and send Yamada on his way, otherwise he'll be attacked by fire if the timer runs out. Out in the real world, you can equip Yamada with different sets of weapons and armor that you either collected in the dungeon, crafted on your own, or purchased from a store. There are over 100 different sets of armor, and you want to complete a set because it gives you additional perks. And there's a whole system of upgrading and crafting that you can fall into, which encourages you to go back into the game world and grind a little bit. I'm still working on my poop set. Of course, this wouldn't be an RPG without monsters, and there's plenty of them to meet, fight, and collect. Yamada will fight any monster that's in his pathway in the dungeon, and monsters will attack him in return. Then becomes the choice of when do I cast a spell, what armor do I take down into the dungeon, can I fight this monster, get to the healing circle, and then fight another monster before they kill me? For a simple puzzle game, there's quite a bit of strategy going on here. Since this is a free-to-play game, there are some paid DLC aspects to Dandy Dungeon. You can buy onigiri, which are given to hungry people as payment for them to go out to other towers and find you rare materials, gold, or weapons. This is an automatic process, so you give them one onigiri, they'll go out and bring you back a bunch of shit. In other words, this is a bit of a loot crate system. But the onigiri also serve another purpose. So if Yamada is traveling through a dungeon and he finds himself killed, you can use one onigiri to bring him back to life, a la the death metal system from Let It Die. You can earn onigiri just by doing regular quests in the dungeons, or it's given to you as a login bonus for checking in with the game every once in a while. So I don't find the free-to-play aspects to be too egregious. You can still find a lot of charm, humor, and interesting characters without ever spending $1 on Dandy Dungeon. This isn't the kind of game that you just beat in one sitting. It's something you run a few dungeons during a lunch break over a longer period of time. Just don't let your coworkers see you playing this, unless you're prepared to answer for some weird shit on your screen. Thankfully, they've provided an FAQ for you. Why does Yamada-kun remove all of his clothing before programming? Doing so increases his concentration. Thanks for having my back, Onion Games. I can't escape the meta feeling that I get when I play Dandy Dungeon. It's like you're playing out some of the challenges and anxieties that Yoshihiro Kimura went through when he struck it out on his own to develop his own game. It's like him giving a behind-the-scenes glimpse into how Dandy Dungeon itself was developed. And it's fucking great. The game has so much content to it that I don't think I'll ever be able to see it through, because once again, a day after writing my script, Kimura announces the end of Dandy Dungeon is coming on December 20th, 2018. Yamada-kun, I barely knew thee. Hi, past Miles, this is future Miles. Turns out there's another update to the story. Onion Games is gonna put out a final patch for Dandy Dungeon that makes it essentially an offline game. While there's no concrete outline to what's gonna be added to the game to make it completely offline, and what features will be removed, I just think it's a really cool gesture that Onion Games is making to preserve the game forever. So now you definitely have no excuse not to check it out. Sorry to interject myself, it won't happen again. On with the show. Let's move on to the second game, Million Onion Hotel. Million Onion Hotel is a touch-based puzzle game released for iOS and Android devices for the price of $4.99. And before that turns you away, let me tell you, it's absolutely worth it. I'm gonna do my best to try to describe the plot, but I don't think there's any solid through line to connect all the weird shit going down. There's a strange man in a powdered wig with hot dog lips that rides in a hovercraft. This is Dr. Peace, and he runs the Million Onion Hotel, which is known for its miracle soup that holds a mysterious power. Anyway, once upon a time, Dr. Peace was like a famous inventor who created all these robots to serve humanity and bring about world peace. But then a general comes along and wants to use those robots for military purposes. Then tapping and shenanigans ensue. That's all you need to know. Now listen to me as I describe the gameplay to my friend Jarrett, who's never played the game before. So you want to get like 2 lines in a row if you can. Yeah. Because if you get like 2 lines that intersect and you put an onion on there, you get a cowbell. And if you touch that cowbell, it goes into frenzy mode. Oh, and then frenzy mode, you can tap a bunch of fruit and get soldiers for the boss battle. Oh, of course. And then if you get a double line within frenzy mode,
there will be special watermelons that shit out diamonds, and if you get those diamonds, it increases your score, and you'll get more time, because time is like your HP in this game. There are onions that sprout that have timers on them, and if you collect them, they help you with your boss fights, because the boss fights are giant, deformed onions, and they eat up your time, and they've got barriers, so you gotta throw soldiers at them when the barriers are down.
What was that? What was that? This is a fucking HP bar.
Yeah, you got that 15 seconds right there?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a game you gotta play with multiple fingers. Like, there'll be like special tapping sections. Like, you gotta play with 8 fingers sometimes.
I know, I need to go there.
Yeah. Trying to play this on the PC is a pain in the ass.
Oh yeah, just clicking it, that'd be a nightmare.
Oh yeah, I had to make macros. Basically, I made a grid of keys, and then like, I had like maybe 12 squares on my keyboard, and the rest, like the bottom row, was my mouse. Yeah. So I'm just like tapping shit like crazy. Oh shit! Did you get the double line? Oh no, you're about to do the onion time. Okay, you're gonna break that screen. Okay.
Almost onion. Oh, onion time.
Yeah.
Onion soup.
So now you get to watch our little scene play out.
Oh god, there's fruit. Miles, there's fruit everywhere.
Get all the fruit!
Try it, holy shit. What's that person doing?
If you touch him, you unlock him.
Unlocked, okay. Soldier unlocked.
Just moments later, he purchased the game. I consider that a personal victory. I'm playing the game on BlueStacks, which is an Android-based emulator for the PC, and it's damn near impossible to play without fingers. So I couldn't capture some of the later moments. But speaking from my experience on the phone, the game has a surprising amount of strategy to it, as you want to build up as many soldiers as you can for the boss fights, as well as keeping track of your time. There's a lot of unlockables in this game as well, such as storyboards that explain the story, but not really. This is a game I still find myself going back to, and it comes with my highest recommendation. Check it out.
Place the onion in the tub. Dedicate. Dear citizen, barrier.
Their third and most recently developed game is known as Blackbird, which was released for the Nintendo Switch and Steam, which is a side-scrolling seamless shoot-'em-up in the vein of Twinbee. The game doesn't exactly have an objective storyline, as each of the scenes have implications behind them, but there's no one solid interpretation of what's going on. There's a young girl all alone in the world who dies suddenly in the middle of a populated city, and no one really seems to care. She befriends a black blob with eyes that absorbs her body, which turns her into an egg that hatches into the vengeful Blackbird that's only mission is genocide of all the people everywhere. As the Blackbird, you go around shooting out these bubbles that capture people and cause them to implode from the inside out. You start off as a small Blackbird, but the more people you kill and objects you destroy yields all these shiny green gems that you can collect to power up your Blackbird, which causes it to grow in size and gives you a new weapon to use. At your disposal, you not only have your standard attack, but you also have a series of bombs. There are a series of guard towers contained in each level, as indicated by these targets on the bottom screen. They constantly spawn enemies, so you want to destroy them and collect the giant gems they drop. After you destroy all the guard towers, prompts the boss fight for the stage. Now I know what you're thinking. This seems like a basic side-scroller shooter that you could beat in one sitting. Well, good luck, because you're gonna have a very hard time getting to the final boss if you're not crafting the perfect run from the get-go. Let me explain what I mean. You want to make it to the final boss with the strongest set of weapons possible. To do this, you cannot get hit by any of the enemies. Otherwise, it powers you down to the previous weapon set. You also have to spend a decent amount of time grinding for gems in each given level. The fastest way to get gems is to kill as many enemies in a combo that you can until your combo meter maxes out. Then group up a bunch of enemies and set off a bomb, which will then suck up all the enemies and fill the screen with gems, allowing you to upgrade. Most of the strategy in the game involves knowing when to use the bombs. In each level are hidden pots of onion soup, which will drop a power-up that you can shoot to either give you more life, an additional bomb, or faster speed. My personal strategy is to pick up a couple of speed boosts, ignore all the life upgrades, and collect as many bombs as possible. And you can't spend too much time in a level, otherwise this giant robot bird thing will constantly pursue you until you're dead. So there's a little bit of pressure to push forward, destroy the towers, and get to the boss. The boss fights capture the over-the-top ridiculousness found in a lot of bullet hells, and all contain 2 or more forms to defeat. Longtime composer Hirofumi Taniguchi, whose previous works include some of my favorite games such as the Suikoden series, Chulip, and Chibi Robo, is a key player in the Onion Games style. Onion Games developed Blackbird around Taniguchi's music and not the other way around. I told Taniguchi-san, this time I want to make a shooting game, but you don't need to see what I'm gonna do. Just make music for me and I can combine it with the game. Taniguchi lends a Danny Elfman-esque full-body gothic orchestra to Blackbird, and in pure Oingo Boingo fashion, his vocals as well. Words are sung in this signature unintelligible gibberish, which is often found in his prior works like Chulip and Chibi Robo, in lieu of any particular language. If you do manage to beat Blackbird, you will unlock the True Mode, which is the harder difficulty that throws more enemies, bullets, and phases into the boss fight, as well as rewarding the player with more story. I was only able to make it to the 3rd level before I got my ass handed to me, but I imagine with enough persistence I'll finally see it through to the end. Once further, it's another game that keeps me coming back for more. And since Blackbird is their first console release on the Nintendo Switch, I imagine that it's going to have a wider audience base than their prior 2 works. The $20 price tag may be too steep for some out there, but I feel like I've got my money's worth out of it. Either way, if you ever see it on sale, I highly recommend picking it up, especially if you love classic retro-style shooters, because you won't find any as well crafted as Blackbird. Seeing games like the 3 I just presented gives me a little hope as a big fan of bizarre and strange games that were often found during the PlayStation 2 generation that were seemingly missing from the modern one. It's nice to know that some developers behind my favorite games during that generation have found a new path in the form of independent game development. We were in the middle of a new wave of strange and unusual games without ever realizing it. And who do we have to thank at the end of the day for starting this cool new wave of Japanese indie games? Only one man I can think of, Keiji Inafune.
One of the smartest in the world, amazing advancements within the field of robotics. Money was no object, but he never felt the need to make a profit with projects. Had a best friend, Dr. Light, they could have changed the world if they stayed together. Friendly competition during the bitter rivalry, and one day it changed forever.